The following is sponsored by Virtua. Virtua supports local sports.
Hi everybody, thanks for joining us for episode 13 of the South Jersey Sports Digest Show, coming to you from the studios of Sterling High School's Channel 19 here in Somerdale. And thank you for watching us on Comcast Cable Channel 97 in Gloucester County, which is the Gloucester County Education Network, as well as TV 19 in western Camden County, including Haddon Township, Haddon Heights, Audubon, Oakland, Haddonfield, Barrington, and Lawnside. You can, of course, see the show on those two channels on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. And, of course, you can also watch the show on our website at www.sjsportsdigest.com. I'm Mike Shute, the lead content editor for South Jersey Sports Digest. We'll be joined shortly by one of our reporters from South Jersey Sports Digest, Scott Chappelear. We're going to talk about the upcoming girls basketball state tournament and take a look at the brackets throughout the South region, and we will talk about that shortly. We want to start off, though, first by recognizing a couple of 1,000-point scorers from high school basketball this week, actually both last night. The show being taped on Thursday. Both of these athletes reached 1,000 points last night, Wednesday. And Haddon Township's Morgan Lenahan will start off with her, and you see a little celebration there and a nice little poster by those two young men as she reached the 1,000-point plateau last night for Haddon Township as the Hawks beat Overbrook at home last night in that win. And for Lenahan, she becomes the third player on that team to reach the 1,000-point plateau, joining Alasia Carr as well as Bella Preziosi. So that's a high-scoring team you've got there in Haddon Township. So you get a good look at Morgan Lenahan there. Also, on the boys' side, another 1,000-point scorer last night. Cherry Hill West's Cam Oztamur reached 1,000 points last night. There you see him after the game with his coach and the ball, and a great effort from Oztamur as his team was able to knock off Shawnee last night in Olympic Conference play. So a couple of 1,000-point scorers coming your way last night here in South Jersey. And as you may know or may not know, if you check our website on our basketball pages, girls basketball, boys basketball, you will be able to see the complete chart of 1,000-point scorers on each of those two pages. So please check it out. If we're missing someone, please let us know via email or via Twitter, Facebook. You can reach out to us many ways via social media. Now let's talk wrestling, and let's start off by taking a look back at last week's wrestling state finals, or last weekend's wrestling state finals. And the conversation has to start with South Jersey's only state champion, and that being the Delsea Crusaders. You see them there getting their trophy. Coach Greg Soer's team was able to get past Paramus by a point, 28-27 in the Group 3 state final. And the Crusaders did so by only winning 6 of the match's bouts. Jake Hollowell, Joe Fabrizio, and Mark Cheney nailed down 3 consecutive pins at 195, 220, and heavyweight to put Delsea ahead 18-12 after they were trailing 12-0. Then Edison Echeverria grabbed a major decision at 113. John Hazlitt and Tom Carney earned decisions at 120 and 126 respectively. And the Crusaders led 28-15 with 3 matches left, and they just had to have no one really get pinned or lose a major decision in those final 3 matches. They were able to hold on, winning at 28-27. So congratulations to the Delsea Crusaders. Let's take a look at the rest of the state final scoreboard, if we can. And as we mentioned, Delsea, the only team from South Jersey to win a state championship. You see the score there. Paulsboro fell in its quest for a 29th state championship and its first undefeated season since 2000, losing to Boundbrook 41-18 in the Group 1 final. And you see St. Augustine and Holy Cross at the bottom there ran into buzzsaws in Groups A and B, respectively. Not on the scoreboard in the state semifinals, not on the final scoreboard, but in the state semifinals, you had Clearview, which was toppled in the semifinals, losing a close match to Jackson by the score of 33-27, and that was in the Group 4 matchup. Clearview won the state championship last year in Group 3. Also in Group 2, Buna was eliminated in the state semifinals as well, falling to Hanover Park, the eventual state champion, losing to them 47-18. So that's some updated information for you from the wrestling state finals this past weekend. And we'll take a look now at the upcoming wrestling action this weekend. Districts begin, and here's a look at the sites for district competition with the goal of getting to the state finals in Atlantic City. Of course, districts, this section of the wrestling tournament now is all focused on the individuals, and all those individuals looking for an opportunity to get to Atlantic City in the state finals. So you've got District 25 at Northern Burlington, District 26 at Holy Cross, District 27 will be taking place at Cherokee High School, District 28 at Collingswood, District 29 will be at Rowan College at Gloucester County, District 30 at Overbrook, District 31 at Delsea, and District 32 at Absegami. Those 8 districts represent the 2 regions, Regions 7 and 8 in South Jersey, and once you proceed out of districts, you move on to regional competition. Look for a story previewing the districts 29, 30, 31, and 32 competition on our website as it's up there right now, brought to you, written by our very own Pete DiBiase as he examines the competition in those districts, and we'll have wrestling coverage for you coming up this weekend as well. Next up on our show, we'll take a look at our South Jersey Sports Digest Total Turf Athletes of the Week. First, we'll start out with our female athlete of the week, who comes from the basketball hardwood, and she is a Camden Catholic product, as she helped lead the Irish to the Girls South Jersey Invitational Basketball Tournament. It's Taiah Thornton, a junior from Camden Catholic. She was the MVP of the Girls Basketball South Jersey Invitational Basketball Tournament, scored a game-high 15 points in the championship game, as she was able to help Camden Catholic overcome Gloucester Catholic and win the 2015 championship. Those 2 teams met last year in the championship game. We'll talk with our very own Scott Chappelear about that in just a minute. But first, let's reveal our male athlete of the week. And our male athlete of the week, also brought to you by Total Turf and the Total Turf Experience in Pittman. It's Theo Holloway, senior basketball player from Paulsboro, who scored a game-high 23 points to help guide the Red Raiders over Camden in overtime at the Cherry Hill East Invitational last weekend on Saturday before the weather turned, and Holloway and the Red Raiders were able to upset Camden in that in overtime in that great tournament. He also helped his team to a 3-0 mark last week, averaging 22.3 points per game. And the Red Raiders have now won 17 games in a row, including a win just the other day over Sterling High School. So Holloway has Paulsboro on a roll, and there you have, our South Jersey Total Turf, South Jersey Sports Digest Total Turf Athletes of the Week. Let's bring in Scott Chappelear now, and we could talk a little bit about girls basketball. Scott, thanks for coming by and joining us.
Absolutely.
Glad to have you here as always. And
Scott's talking about the girls' hoops.
Scott's been doing a great job for us covering girls basketball throughout the winter on South Jersey Sports Digest. Hope you've been enjoying his coverage, and he's doing fantastic work for us. And Scott, let's talk a little bit first about, we showed Taiah Thornton, our female athlete of the week this week, and let's talk a little bit about the South Jersey Invitational Basketball Tournament. First, from a broad perspective, and then we'll talk about that championship game.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's a unique tournament that's been put together by here in South Jersey, and it gives schools of all sizes an opportunity to compete against each other for a championship.
Yeah, and in North Jersey, you see county tournaments all over the place, or conference tournaments where teams of all sizes can get together against each other and play. There really hasn't been anything like that in South Jersey until this tournament was created 6 years ago. Mike Lenahan runs the tournament. It started out as just 16 teams. Now it's up to 24 teams, with teams on a waiting list to get in. You know, if they can try to get in, if somebody else happens to drop out. You know, the one shame obviously is that the Cape Atlantic schools can't really participate because their schedule is so packed already that they really can't get out of their conference schedule to play in this tournament. Plus, they have their own conference tournament at the end of the year. But otherwise, it's all the top teams in South Jersey. You know, we saw some great competition this year. Got to see some great matchups that you wouldn't normally see. Like we were talking just before the show about Camden Catholic playing Haddon Township in this tournament. You know, that's a game that would never happen except in a tournament like this. And it's great to see those kind of matchups play out and see who really is maybe the best team overall in South Jersey.
And in this case, Camden Catholic was able to take the championship, Scott, and win that championship game against what is a very good Gloucester Catholic team, too. Two teams not unfamiliar with each other in any sense of the word. They've played, of course, last year in the championship game in that tournament, and it always seems like they're clashing at some point along the way. You get to this championship game, though, and you want to talk about it a little bit, Scott, and, you know, just talk about the competitiveness between those two teams and really what that rivalry means.
Yeah, I mean, especially because they met 3 times last year. They had a regular season meeting scheduled last year that ended up getting played on a Wednesday night in the snow when everybody else had canceled because they were 2 non-publics. They were able to play anyway. Camden Catholic won that first meeting, but then Gloucester Catholic won in the South Jersey Invitational Final and then again in the semifinals in non-public A. And so there was a lot of revenge factor for Camden Catholic coming to the game. And I will say, it was a close game, but neither team played really well. I mean, you have to remember, Camden Catholic scored 88 points in the semifinal, running past Woodrow Wilson, and is on a roll. They only score 41 points, but they still pull out the win over Gloucester Catholic, who, you know, safe to say played easily, maybe their worst game of the year, definitely one of their worst games of the year. And, you know, I know Coach Lisa Gadeka was not happy with the game afterward. But, again, it was a close game. You know, Taiah Thornton and the rest of that team, you know, there's 3 junior guards, Taiah Thornton, Julia Brongart, Sierra Taylor, that kind of lead that team. They've got the freshman, Brittany Garner, in the middle, who's really come on after a slow start and played, you know, amazingly well. They have Kate Deutsch, another freshman off the bench. You know, senior Ariel Robinson. That team is just playing so well right now. That win over Gloucester Catholic was their 20th in a row after losing their season opener. And now you've got to consider them among the favorites. And assuming they don't play as badly as they did in that South Jersey final or in the Invitational final, you know, and can play the way that they've been playing up until that point, you know, maybe they can give St. John Vianney a game. I mean, we'll talk about that in a minute, but St. John Vianney is the top seed in non-public A. And the question is, can anybody play with them? And, you know, maybe Camden Catholic's trying to prove that they can.
And we'll take a look at that a little bit further down the line. Let's continue our conversation about the South Jersey Invitational, as well as some other news that came out of that. Timber Creek's Brittany Martin, Scott, wins the 3-point shootout. Despite getting banged up in the, I guess, the consolation game prior to the 3-point shootout, she came out, hobbled around, and knocked down enough 3-pointers to beat Maggie McIntyre of Gloucester Catholic to win that 3-point title. Talk about that a little bit and how that's kind of like an added little bonus to the entertainment value of the South Jersey Invitational.
And you know, it's a great thing that they added that to the tournament. I mean, it started out they didn't have a ton of kids enter, but now you know they had over 100 entrants to begin this tournament, and you know narrowed it down to the final 8 and then to the final 4 for that last day. And the final 4, you know, was a pretty good final 4. You had Brittany Martin, Maggie McIntyre, as you mentioned, Brianna Cappuccioni from Washington Township, and Tamara Sellers from Woodrow Wilson. And all of them shot really well. There was actually a tiebreaker that determined that Martin and McIntyre would go to the final. And, you know, again, they played the consolation game, Timber Creek, Woodrow Wilson, and Martin went down in agony late in the third quarter. You know, she had gotten banged up right before halftime, came back out for the third quarter, then went down, didn't even really get hit, just went down, and she had to be helped off, could put no weight on the ankle, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I just hope she can play again. And somehow, you know, we're all wondering what's going to happen when she can't come out. Maggie's out there warming up, and suddenly they announced that she's going to shoot, and she hobbles out onto the court, and they gave both competitors 2 minutes, and she took all 2 minutes to limp around from station to station and then take the half-court shot, which, you know, she almost made. And she managed to edge Maggie McIntyre by 1 to win the title. And it's one of the more impressive things I've seen. But give Maggie McIntyre credit, though. She's a junior. She won it as a freshman 2 years ago. She finished 3rd last year. She finishes 2nd this year. You know, hopefully that doesn't mean a 4th place next year. But, you know, again, you know, year after year, she has consistently proven to be one of the best 3-point shooters in South Jersey. Didn't win it this year, but, you know, give Martin credit for pulling it out.
And, you know, impressively given the injury, and she had to hobble around and take care of business. All right, let's take a look at the state tournament, Scott, and let's talk a little bit about that. The pairings were released last week, I guess it was, and there we see the Group 4 listings up on our screen. But, you know, this always makes for interesting matchups and interesting games throughout the way, along the way as the tournament rolls along. When we talk Group 1, you know, Shawnee gets the #1 seed. They, of course, are the only team to beat Camden Catholic, which has since won 20 games in a row. So it's got to say something about the talent level Shawnee's bringing to the table.
Well, and again, look at the top 3 seeds: Shawnee, Lenape, Cherokee. all from the same school district, all from the same division in the Olympic American, which, I mean, the last several years, the Olympic American has been the cream of the crop in South Jersey Group 4, and these teams always do well and always end up facing off against each other. We're used to seeing Eastern in there up until the last couple of years. Washington Township is another team that's battled year in and year out, won 3 straight Group 4 titles up until last year. They're a 13 seed. I don't see them being able to get out of that part of the bracket, but you know, Shawnee and Lenape and Cherokee have played some huge battles this year, and I think any one of those 3 teams can win it. The interesting thing, you know, we look at, you know, we talked about the consolation game, you know, Woodrow Wilson beating Timber Creek, and then in the final, Camden Catholic beating Gloucester Catholic. There was one other game on Sunday, a showcase game before those, where RV knocked off Ocean City. And RV had kind of been up and down. They're a younger team. They've lost a lot of that talent that carried them the last few years. They upset Ocean City, and suddenly maybe they're in the conversation as a 5 seed in Group 4. It's going to be interesting. That trip to Southern in the second round, that's a long way to go. I mean, luckily they're a little closer than some schools are, but that's a heck of a road trip to have to make. If they get past that, you know, it's going to be interesting to see them play Shawnee, and then if they manage to get past that, whoever they get out of the other half of that bracket.
So there you have the quick analysis in the South Jersey Group 4. Let's take a flip and look at South Jersey Group 3 if we can. Scott did mention Ocean City as being one of those top teams throughout South Jersey this season, and they are certainly the #1 seed there. You see number 2 is Timber Creek, and I guess that will largely hinge on the health of Brittany Martin and how she can continue to play down the line. Mainland, number 3 seed, and Woodrow Wilson, number 4, Delsea, number 5. There's a lot of teams there, Scott, that have played some pretty good basketball this year. I don't know if they've all put together consistency throughout, but certainly Woodrow Wilson is a team that reached the state championship level last year. So there's a lot of diversity here in this group.
Yeah, and I mean, Woodrow Wilson would have to make another run like they did last year to get to the Tournament of Champions like they did. You know, they're a team that's, you know, suffered injuries and, you know, lost some kids from last year, and, you know, have really played a brutal schedule as well. So, you know, they are tested. So if they get on a roll in the playoffs, who knows? Ocean City and Timber Creek, I think, have to be considered the favorites in this group. You know, Timber Creek was, you know, they were in the final last year, and especially with this being Brittany Martin's senior year, I think this is a real goal for them to try and capitalize on her being there and try and win a championship while she's there. Ocean City's a tough task. Yeah, that's gonna be a big test for them if both teams make it to the final. Mainland's an interesting team, but again, Mainland would have to travel to Timber Creek in the semifinals. So I think, you know, Mainland's a much tougher team at home, I think, than they are on the road, especially making that kind of a road trip to Timber Creek. So I expect to see Ocean City and Timber Creek battling for that title. You know, Delsea's a dark horse, I think. You know, they've played an interesting schedule. They've tested themselves. But you know, being in that Tri-County Diamond division, which I think is a little bit of a weaker division, especially with Gloucester Catholic leaving that division this year, I don't know that they've seen the level of talent week in and week out that will give them a chance to really compete, you know, throughout the tournament.
But obviously a team that has an opportunity.
Well, Haley Parks is a heck of a player and has had an amazing season for Delsea. So.
And she could go off at any time, so that you always have to keep an eye on that. South Jersey Group 2, we'll take a look at the pairings there. Lower Cape May, led by 2,000-point scorer Lauren Holden, is the #1 seed there. Sterling, where we're coming to you with our show, and we do it each and every week. They're the #2 seed, and of course they've had a very good year here. And Coach Katie McDonald winning her 200th game along the way, and you know, we had her on our show. She talked to us about the passing of her mom and all that situation. So we know that this is a very close-knit team at Sterling. They're all playing for one another, playing for their coach. You know, Haddonfield's always a tough matchup. Middle Township coming out of the Cape too. Have to keep your eye on them.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting mix because Group 2 is usually, again, dominated by the Colonial Conference teams. You see Sterling there, Haddonfield, and give Overbrook credit. Overbrook's a team that has really struggled for years now to be in the mix, you know, in the conversation. They've had an amazing season. Give them credit for being a 6th seed, and yeah, they could be a tough test for anyone if they're playing at their best. Sterling Haddonfield, if that becomes a semifinal matchup, should be really entertaining to watch. I mean, you know, you've got Jackie Mulligan now, you know, coaching at Haddonfield, you know, the former Sterling player and coach against, you know, her former school. But Lower Cape May, you know, they have that top seed, they played really well for most of the year, but then they got hammered by Ocean City when they played them, and they shut down Holden. It's going to be interesting to see whether Holden can not only score but get contributions from her teammates to maintain that #1 seed and make it through to the final. So.
And they would have to play a pretty game Bridgeton team in the second round if they get to that. Oh, no, actually, they would play the 8 seed. I apologize. But Bridgeton was the team I wanted to talk about, too.
Mm-hmm.
Scott, of course, led by Destiny Thompson. And she's a player that averages double-double this season. She's over 1,000 career points, 1,000 career rebounds. Could provide to be a formidable opponent if she gets on a roll against any team. I mean, she had a game where she scored 39 points and pulled down over 20 rebounds. So she could certainly carry a team.
That Bridgeton team is so interesting. And they're another team that I think deserves a lot of credit because they have no depth, because they're a very small team. When I saw them play earlier this year, they had 9 kids on the bench, including the starters, and they don't go deep on the bench. But when those kids play together and don't get out of control, they can run and they can get out. And with Thompson in the middle causing problems at both ends of the floor, they can be a very intriguing matchup, especially if you don't have someone to match up. The good news for Sterling is that they do have someone to match up in the middle with Carter, or with Jordan Wallace. So, Jordan Wallace and Destiny Thompson would be a very interesting second-round matchup.
Let's take a look at South Jersey Group 1. And Scott, we talked a little bit about Haddon Township earlier when we talked about the 1,000-point scorer in Morgan Lenahan. But that's a team, as we mentioned, with 3,000-point scores. So we certainly know that the Hawks can put points on the board. They will see Palmyra in that first round. You see the rest of the matchups there. And I think... you look down at Gloucester against Pennsville. They'll have to a little Tri-County Conference matchup there, where 2 familiar teams with one another will have to battle it out in that first round matchup. But Haddon Township, if you're for my money, is certainly the head and shoulders team to beat here in Group 1. I think.
Well, and then they have been all season, and I think they were expected to be coming into the year because they had 5 returning starters from last year's team that won South Jersey and made it to the state championship game. It's no surprise to see Haddon Township and Gloucester there, even though, Gloucester went through a coaching change, lost some key players from last year. Haddon Heights, give Haddon Heights a ton of credit as a 3 seed with Lauren Kendra, first-year coach, taking over there with a team that lost basically 60 to 70% of its offense, graduated last year with some new faces in the lineup. She's taken that team and done amazing things with them. They could be a dark horse. Now, Haddon Township is going to be a real interesting case because they lost Katie Burns last week to a torn ACL, one of those 5 returning starters. They don't go deep on the bench, and the kids that do come off the bench are young kids, freshmen, sophomores. So it's going to be interesting to see who comes in to replace Burns in the starting lineup and then what they have coming off the bench now and how that affects them in South Jersey, and if they do get out of South Jersey, then beyond. And if you want to talk about another potential dark horse, I mean, Burlington City, you got Jada Atchison, who's, just an amazing player. It's interesting that some teams have been able to kind of shut her down a little bit, and I wonder if that's not her so much as her not getting as much help from her teammates to kind of take some of the pressure off of her. They actually almost lost to Eastern, who hadn't won a game yet this year. But it should be interesting to see if they make it out and maybe knock off the 4 seed, what would happen to them against Haddon Township.
We'll take a peek at the non-public A South, and of course, Camden Catholic with the bye. They are right now, I guess, the #1 team in South Jersey. Gloucester Catholic gets the bye at #3. All eyes, of course, are on that #1 seeded team, St. John Vianney, and that's always been the hurdle for our area teams to get over, Scott. And is it a year where one of those 2 teams, Gloucester Catholic or Camden Catholic, can make that leap?
Well, it's interesting because Gloucester Catholic made it to the championship game against Vianney last year, fell behind by over 20 points, rallied all the way back to get it to within 2, and then just ran out of gas at the end. This Camden Catholic team is fascinating to me because there's only 1 senior on this team. They had some new faces in the lineup, and they have just meshed so well together. They can run, they can play up tempo, and as they proved on Sunday against Gloucester Catholic, they can slow it down if they have to and beat a really good team in the half court. So they might be the best option to do it unless Gloucester Catholic can really put it together. They had Danny Sandelin come in to their lineup and sort of change things up a little bit, and they're trying to find her role within that offense. When they all play well together, they're amazing. but sometimes they kind of get out of sync and struggle. So, if one of those teams puts it all together, maybe they can battle Vianney. Vianney has almost everyone back, too, from last year. They were a very young team last year. So, all these teams have a lot of faces back, and, it's just a matter of whether one of those two teams from South Jersey really, I think, can, find a way to knock off Vianney.
Bishop Eustace is in the mix there, Paul VI, Holy Cross as well. But realistically, it comes down to those three teams when you're talking about non-public A. Let's take a quick peek at non-public B before we wrap things up here on the South Jersey Sports Digest show. You see Wildwood Catholic will get a first-round match on the road at Timothy Christian. Holy Spirit is a 4 seed. They'll get a home game, and St. Joe Hamilton is in the mix there as well. And I think B, Scott, is a little bit more flexible when you talk about opportunities for teams, but Holy Spirit, I guess, is the team with the best opportunity from South Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to look at a team, St. Rose is a team that plays those top teams in the state because they're up there with Vianney, Red Bank Catholic, and those teams, and they play them on a regular basis, so they're really tested. Patrick School knocked off Gloucester Catholic last week in a non-league game, so you know how good they can be. Roselle Catholic's the top seed. Even Trenton Catholic, I think, is a solid team, not necessarily as good as they have been in recent years. Holy Spirit's got a tough task in front of them. If they manage to make it out of that bracket and make it to the final, I don't know that they would be favored against either Patrick or St. Rose, whichever of those teams makes it to the final. But I definitely, I think probably one of those teams might be the odds-on favorite, maybe even over Roselle.
Thank you, Scott, for coming in and talking South Jersey girls basketball with us and taking a peek at the NJSIAA playoff South sectionals, and we had a good opportunity to analyze that, so thanks, Scott, for your expertise.
Absolutely.
As always, we appreciate you coming by, and be sure to read all of Scott's content on our website, www.sjsportsdigest.com. That's going to do it for this week's edition of the South Jersey Sports Digest show. Once again, I'm Mike Shute. We want to thank Scott Chappelear for joining us. We want to thank everybody here at Sterling High School's Channel 19 for their help as well. We'll see you next time on the South Jersey Sports Digest show. Bye-bye.